Hey everyone, how's it going? We're going to be talking about catch-all email verification today. And more in particular, we're going to be talking about it in the context of putting together a list of data for any form of outbound marketing or lead generation campaign that you or your company might be looking to do. The main things that we're going to cover today is what actually is catch-all verification, why is it important that you have a catch-all validator within your tech stack to be able to get as much data coverage as possible. Then also some recommendations from me on what catch-all verification tools are out there that are good, that we have tried and tested in our campaigns as well. The first thing that I'm going to do is, and you're just going to have to excuse my awful writing on this, is I'm also just going to bring up the context for where a catch-all validator is actually used. Okay, so whenever you're putting together a list of data for any sort of outbound marketing push, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is in the context of putting together a cold email campaign. Obviously, for a cold email campaign, I'm going to need data, in particular emails, and I'm going to need to be validating those emails as well before sending to them, right? But if you're looking at this and maybe you're putting together just like a pipeline of data, or you're looking to enrich your CRM with more data, whatever it is in your use case, or whatever you might need to be validating work email addresses for, you can adopt a similar logic for what I'm talking about here. Without further ado, I think the first thing I want to do is just explain, like, where does a catch-all validator actually fall into the process of preparing a list of data. So obviously number one, right, would be, or the first thing that you do would be to ultimately pull a list of data from a database. And again, you're gonna have to excuse my awful writing here, but the first step that you would do when putting together a list of data is to scrape the data from a database. So these databases could be like LinkedIn Sales Nav, they could be like Apollo, or they could be Zoom Info, something like that. It's ultimately a place where you're pulling data points like first name, last name, job title, company domain, ultimately like a list of data at scale that isn't enriched yet. So it's the data that you pull before you then go on and go to another tool to then enrich the emails, and obviously enrich the mobile numbers as well if that's something that you would be after. So I suppose the next thing that we would do would be to clean the data up a little bit. I'm not going to dedicate a whole second section to that, but we'd probably then just have, before we actually go and enrich our data with emails, what we do is we'd probably clean up the data, so remove any, maybe we use AI to look up company descriptions, and then maybe remove any that aren't quite relevant to our ICP. Before then, in the second stage, what we would then do is move into enrichment. I feel like I'm back at school doing this, because I'm using a pad on my laptop, so it's really tough to write, but anyway. So second will be enrichment. So when I say enrichment, I'm talking about we are ultimately using tools like SPAO, ICPs, or Full Enrich, for example, to go and take the list of data that we just scraped and then enrich it with emails and mobile numbers, whatever data point we ultimately want to get. For the most part, it's either the email or the mobile number or both, right, that we're going to be using to enrich. So up to this point, we've pulled our data from a database, and that's static data, or obviously SalesNav is more live data as well, but we're ultimately scraping data from a data source, right? We're then cleaning up that data, so before enrichment, we're removing any one that isn't quite relevant. And then after enrichment, so this is the process of then using things like the first name, last name, and company domain and LinkedIn profile to then go and find the email number and mobile number of the people that we want to be reaching out to. So once we've then enriched the emails, the next thing that we then need to do is going to be to validate. The third stage, validate. And the process of validation is ultimately to verify to as high a percentage as possible that the emails that you've just found are the actual emails for the person that you want to be reaching out to. So tools that we use for general just validation that you might have heard of might be Lead Magic, Million Verify. This is just shocking. I'm just going to put V, I'm not even going to attempt verifier. So we've got Lead Magic, Million Verifier, other ones, what can we do, like Bounce Ban as well, potentially. right? So these are basically validation tools that will tell us, is our email valid, is it a catch-all, or is it invalid? And it'll be one of those three things. So usually whenever we're validating email addresses, we're going to talk specifically about email addresses now, we usually do two levels of validation. So what we'll do is we'll first use a tool like Lead Magic, Million Verify, or Bounce Ban to verify the bulk of the list. And like I said, what will happen is the report that you then get back, it will tell you a percentage of the emails that are valid, that are ready to send to now. It'll tell you a percentage of the emails are catch-all, and then it will tell you that a percentage of the emails are invalid. So obviously the purpose of this video today is we're going to be focusing on what is actually a catch-all email address and what can we do to then validate those to then still be able to use them to add to our CRM or to send cold emails to, or whatever we want to do with that data. And I guess the first part about this is really understanding like what actually is a catch-all email. So what does a catch-all email actually mean, right? Why is it that we can't just immediately send to these emails? Why do we have to go through another level of verification before we can do that? To put it as simply as possible, a catch-all email address is basically a singular address, right? Within so let's say that this is our catch-all email address, right? This is my horrible drawing of an envelope. So this is our catch-all email address, okay? And a catch-all email address is ultimately an email address on a domain. So, for example, like a catch-all email address might be, let's do @domain.com. This is just shocking. Yeah, so it will be like so it might be like info@domain.com, or it could be the name of an actual person at the company, so it still could be lisa@domain.com or info@domain.com, whatever that is. And ultimately, a catch-all email address is when a company maybe churns staff or maybe deactivates an email address. Let's pretend that we've got 3 deactive or churned email addresses down here, okay? So when these email addresses were active, they were obviously receiving emails, and as those email addresses continue to receive emails, a catch-all is ultimately the place where all of those emails go. So remember that these email addresses down here are inactive email addresses, right? But ultimately a catch-all could be an actual person's email address, but it could just be where that company has chosen to direct all the mail from inactive email addresses on that domain. So a catch-all email address, it could be an info@ email. It could also, though, be an actual email address for a person at the company, and that's exactly why we validate them, right? So the whole purpose of a catch-all validator is to ultimately verify that the emails that are returned to us as catch-all in a report from something like Lead Magic, Million Verify, or Bounce Ban, a catch-all verifier now has the job at just focusing on verifying that email address to verify to us that it's safe to send to. I'm going to now switch over to Clay, and I'm going to show you like an actual breakdown of how this works. Then I'm also going to then show you some of the different tools that are on the market for what you can use to validate your catch-all emails. The reason that these catch-all email addresses can be a problem is because these inboxes could just be set up purely as just a spam trap, or they could be completely unmonitored. Like I said earlier, often these catch-all email addresses are either the email of an actual person at the company who is still active at the company, or it could literally just be a unmonitored domain that is just used to send all the crappy emails that no one wants into a folder that no one checks at all. So the role of a catch-all validator is ultimately to determine, is this email safe to send to in our cold email campaigns? If we send to it, is it going to affect our sender reputation? Is our bounce rate going to shoot up? So when we are validating catch-all emails, I suppose the ultimate goal of doing this is that we are able to take, let's say if we build a list, so let's say we scrape, right, 10,000 people from SalesNav. When we enrich, we find 7,500 emails. When we validate, 5k of those 7,000 are valid, 1,500 of that 7,500 are catch-all, and then 1,000 are invalid, right? So we've then got 1,500 catch-all emails that we just can't do anything with unless we use a catch-all validator to then go and determine whether these email addresses are safe to send to or not. Okay, so let me switch over to Clay, and I'm just going to explain an example of how this works. So for example, in this Clay table, I've got a list of data that I've pulled in from Apollo. Okay, as we outlined here, the first step of any sort of list building process is to scrape data and bring it into somewhere. So I clean it in Clay, and then the next thing that I do is enrich this data. So then in Clay, what I'm doing is via API, I then use waterfall logic to go through lead magic, Prospeo, and full enrich to find as many emails as I can here. And because I used Apollo for this, some of the emails were already found for me. So then I've got a big column of email addresses here. Next, what I'm going to do is then move into the validation stage, right? And you can see here that lead magic is giving me valid emails, it's giving me invalid emails, and it's also giving me invalid catch-all emails. Okay, so as I mentioned, in this list, what's happening is I'm going to get three outcomes. I'm going to get a list of valid emails, I'm going to get a list of catch-all emails, and I'm going to get a list of just full-out invalid emails. Okay, so all the ones that are catch-all, what I then need to do is set up a catch-all verifier to go and ultimately tell me if those emails are safe to send to or not. So now let's talk about some of the options that are actually out there and which one we're currently going to be moving forward with for our catch-all verification. So we've done a fair few tests on different tools that are out there. One of the tools is called Enrichley. So we've been using Enrichley for a while now. I guess the advantages are of Enrichley. I'm just going to pull up the others just so I don't forget. Scrubby is another one just here. But anyway, let's talk about Enrichley first. Enrichley, I guess the advantage of Enrichley is that it does have a native Clay integration. So if I just go down to here, you can see that it's really easy for me to just automatically run this table and be able to validate these catch-all email addresses. So a big positive of Enrichley for me was just the ease in terms of operational management, for actually being able to use the tool and just integrate it directly to Clay. However, obviously, with other tools, you can integrate them into Clay, but you just need to go via HTTP. If you're on the 149 Clay plan, that would mean having to upgrade to be able to bring your own custom APIs. So just one thing to consider there from a cost perspective as well. In terms of the cost, so Enrichley is quite competitive, but it does only work on a monthly recurring model. So I think we have chopped and changed between these plans, but you ultimately are on a retainer with these guys. There isn't any pay-as-you-go options for actually being able to run with Enrichley. The next is Scrubby. So Scrubby do have a pay-as-you-go service. The only problem with Scrubby is that it's really expensive compared to a lot of other tools that are out there. So say, for example, like if we put 50,000 in here, I think, let me just see what price that will be. It's going to make me get an account. Again, we don't use this, but ultimately, my experience with Scrubby is that it was expensive. If we do the maths here, that's obviously what, 3 cents per credit, which would roughly be around, that'd be $1,500 for 50,000 catch-all verifications, which is just, it's really expensive. But one advantage of Scrubby is that you do get pay-as-you-go options, okay? I guess where we're at is obviously we were looking for a tool that we can obviously be able to integrate with Clay, and that doesn't necessarily have to be native, but it just means that we need the tool to have an API basically so that we can make that integration with Clay. But then we also want the flexibility of the pay-as-you-go plan, but then the only problem that was missing for us was just the cost effectiveness of it. So that's when we came across Orbi. And Orbi is a great tool because it combines both. We've obviously used Enrichley and then we've also used Scrubby in the past as well. And what we found is that Orbi is a nice blend of both of those because Orbi does have a really good API. So you can see at the top of my screen here, I'm not going to click on this because our active keys are in there, but you can see here that you've got an API here. You'll just be able to generate your own key and then be able to use that to integrate into your Clay tables via a custom HTTP. So that's really handy. And then also the next thing to talk about with Orbi is just how cost effective it is. So you can see here, while Scrubby was costing roughly $1,500 for 50,000 credits. So you can see here it's more than 20 times more as cost effective to go with Orbi as opposed to Scrubby. And I suppose the final thing to talk about is then just what is actually happening on the results end of using Orbi for your campaigns. So what I want to do is just bring up a campaign now where we used Orbi, and then just show you like some of the typical stats that we were getting. And this is just like a singular campaign, and the purpose of this was to just take in like the offer and the interested response rates out of this. This is purely just like a measurement of deliverability and the bounce rates, okay? So let me just bring that campaign up now. So this was a campaign that we ran purely using email addresses that were catch-all validated from Orbi. So you can see here that unique reply rate was 9%, and the bounce rate was less than 1% on catch-all email addresses, which is really strong. So what this tells me is that this gives me confidence to be able to use Orbi, because obviously Orbi's cheap as chips. The data quality is good, clearly, because we've done this test here. And this gives me confidence to be able to use Orbi in our campaigns and be able to maximize the amount of data that we can actually send to for our clients. So whether you're an agency or whether you're your own business running your own campaigns, I would really encourage using a catch-all validator to maximize the amount of data that you can outbound to. And for me, the best tool at the moment to be able to do that is Orbi, just because it combines the API that's important to us with integrating that into Clay, and it also combines the pay-as-you-go and cost-effective elements into that as well. Yeah, this was a video on catch-all verification, what it is, why I think it's important, and then also the tool that I recommend for you to get started verifying your catch-all addresses. Thank you, and if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or email. And if you do want to book a call to learn some more about our lead gen services and what we could do for your business, on my YouTube channel somewhere there's going to be a link where you can book a call. Feel free to book some time in with me there, and we can have a chat about how this might work for your company specifically.